built a Twilight Alliance in that respect?
Of course, our alliance has been an interesting one because we had a trade union movement. There is a history about the trade union movement in this country. We used to have some trade unions before that were prescribed by law, and black people were not, in fact, allowed to be part of any trade union or to have a union that is registered, because if you carried a particular identification which was called the DOM pass, that in the legal terms of the time, you were not described as an employee, and therefore you had no right to form a union. And because of those conditions, the unionism in South Africa had to take a particular turn and be more politicized to deal with, because that was now a political element dealing with the trade unions. And therefore there was a discussion among the unionists to really establish revolutionary trade unions that would not be necessarily looking after registration. That would be merely looking at the struggle of the workers, that it is only the struggle of the workers that will help for the bosses or the companies to recognize the fact that here is a union, rather than the legal registration through the law, because the law was segregation. The establishment, therefore, in the early 50s of the South African Congress of Trade Unions, which was SACTU, was an important element, which joined the alliance then, which we had, the alliance of the ANC, the alliance of the South African Congress of Trade Unions, the South African Indian Congress, Colored People's Congress, and the Congress of Democrats, which was predominantly the whites. Because of apartheid, you had to have those kind of separate organizations, but they formed an alliance, which was very important insofar as the articulation and crystallization of the ideas of the vision of what South Africa were looking for. It were those organizations that led to the Congress of the People in 1955 that articulated the Freedom Charter. The South African Communist Party at that time had been banned, had been outlawed in 1950. So in a sense, it was not part of the formal alliance, as it were, but it was operating underground, but in tandem with what that alliance was doing. But of course, the repression with time and the banning of the ANC, outlawing of it, etc., destabilized that alliance. We therefore emerged once again, at the end of the day, underground, because others were not necessarily totally banned, but the alliance could not function. So we then emerged with the alliance, which was now the ANC, because it was now gone underground, and therefore it formed an alliance with the South African Communist Party under the same conditions, because they were now both underground. Because SACTU also was persecuted, it could not operate within the country, its leadership. So it also almost went underground. So these three then formed a very core kind of an alliance that exists up to this day. So when COSATU was born, COSATU actually took the place of SACTU, and therefore the alliance continued. And therefore, because of that intertwined kind of working relations, the alliance became important to us. Also that we suffered from the same fate. We were repressed by the same laws. And of course, you often found that many members were actually members of almost all these organizations. If you trace my life, for an example, my beginnings was a trade unionist in the late 50s, and then the ANC. So it is that kind of interaction that made this to be very strong. And because of the theories that the South African Communist Party put across as a vanguard of the working people, as articulating their interests, and therefore the relationship between the trade union and the party had been understood from that point of view. So when we were unburned, once again this alliance emerged and we're all together here. And that's why the alliance has been together all the time. And Chris Hani in particular, because he was one of the leaders of the ANC, but also the leaders of the South African Communist Party. Therefore, from these two organizations that in a sense had very close relations with the trade union movement. So that's why it became almost like one thing. If you took, as I said, the party would say, we are the vanguard of the working people. We want to cater for their interests. The ANC, as articulated by one of his presidents, Chief Lutuli, he actually said ANC was a shield. The trade union movement was a spear. Because he said, in the process of waging the struggle, when you call for a stay at home or a strike, it is the working force that must actually do it. And therefore the encouragement of trade union members to become members of the ANC, as vice versa, that if you are a worker, become a member of the trade union movement, to in a sense dovetail the activities and ideas between the two. And therefore this became almost like a very strong alliance that had a very single-minded kind of a vision. The party was prepared to listen to the program of the ANC and support it, whilst its program went very far than the ANC, but insofar as ANC's program, it supported fully to bring about a democratic country. And then thereafter it will see how it takes its own vision forward. But insofar as attaining independence in South Africa, etc., we all agreed on that one and we were prepared to move. And Chris, therefore, in a sense, was an embodiment of that kind of, or cementing kind of a leader, because he related to all, among others. I mean, many did, but him in particular, because of his own role, I think he therefore became popular from that point of view as a leader of the alliance.
Thank you, Deputy Vice President.
We said that we would be very patient with the time.
30 minutes.
Thank you very much.
They have used 28 of them.